Tonight I will be talking about the health benefits of coffee and specifically Boracia lean. Let's start by saying that the good news for the 108 million Americans who wake up and smell the coffee each day is that the latest research findings suggest our morning java may be better for us than what we think. So let's start by asking the question, why coffee is good for us? More is known about the overall association between coffee and positive health effects than about the mechanism behind it. Antioxidants are one potential reason that good outcomes are seen from coffee. Our bodies produce oxygen radicals, which are damaging to DNA, so antioxidants prevent them from doing damage. Although antioxidants are found in fruits and vegetables, research has shown that coffee is the top source of antioxidants for Americans. Caffeine itself may also contribute to coffee's positive effects on brain health. That may be because caffeine is an antagonist to adenosine receptors. Antagonist means it's very similar to that molecule of adenosine. These receptors normally slow down neural activity when the chemical adenosine binds to them and sort of producing a sleepy feeling. But if caffeine binds to the same receptors, the activity of neurons speed up. Coffee also appears to lower levels of insulin and estrogen, which is perhaps why a study last year found a lower risk of endometrial cancer, that's the inner lining of the uterus, in coffee drinking women. Insulin also plays a role in prostate cancer, another disease coffee may be help stave off. However, from time to time, you might have come across some people who say they get heartburn when they drink coffee. So let me briefly describe a few things when it comes to coffee acidity. Acidity in coffee references two separate meanings, the way it tastes and the way it affects your body. When it comes to taste, acidity in coffee refers to a certain mouthfeel. It gives coffee its brightness and liveliness. There are more than 1,000 different chemical compounds identified in coffee, and about 50 are acids, many of which diminish in roasting. As a general rule, the lighter the roast, the higher the acidity. Darker roasts have lower acidity. Of course, some of the coffee's acids will increase due to roast level, and some will diminish. But the levels of perceivable acids overall diminish by roasting. Now, researchers have found that dark roasted coffee are easier on the stomach than light because they contain a particular compound that prevents the stomach from producing too much acid. Some compounds in coffee, including caffeine, cause the stomach to create more acid, but another compound is called NMP. It stands for N-methyltridinium. Let's call it NMP. Reportedly has the opposite effect. Research shows NMP is generated as the coffee beans are roasted. And the longer and darker the roast, the higher its levels. Dark roasted coffee can contain as much as twice the NMP level as light roasted coffees, though that can vary depending on the variety of the bean. That's good news for those who like their coffee rich and dark, of course. Now at Boracia, our dark roasted coffee beans roasted through IR technology. which means each coffee bean roasted uniformly throughout, and if you perceive it friendly on your stomach, perhaps that's because of the higher content of NMP in lean coffee. Also, our roasting technology produces a pleasant aroma of a compound called furfuryl alcohol, and that is the smell of a toasting bread, which is absent in the traditional roasting coffee. When it comes to antioxidants, coffee beans contain these disease-ravaging antioxidants called quinines, which become more potent after roasting. According to an American Chemical Society news, which recently has been released, coffee is the leading source of antioxidants in American diets, in part because we drink a ton of it. This type of antioxidants, along with the magnesium found naturally in coffee, affect blood sugar levels and are thought to be responsible for the link to a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. As for the lean coffee, there is something far more effective than the goodness of coffee alone. Besides lean coffee having all the physiological benefits of coffee I just described, it is formulated with slendronol, a patent-pending blend of clinically tested ingredients that help support weight control and promote fat burning. The major ingredients in lean are two clinically tested ingredients, a patent-pending chromium complex and a clinically tested chlorogenic acid. In April Science Talk, I discussed in details about the physiological benefits of these two components in combination with sutalin for their effect on glucose and weight management. What I would like to discuss with you tonight is the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant activity of Boracia slendronol. You might have heard that inflammation is perhaps the mother of most diseases. Inflammation causes leptin resistance and other problems in the body. Now let's step back and look at this from a bird's eye view. As you know, diabetes is characterized by impaired glucose metabolism. What many don't realize is that diabetes also involves impaired fat metabolism. Fat exists in the body in three primary forms: free fatty acid, triglycerides, and phospholipids. Triglyceride and phospholipids are the storage forms of fat. However, free fatty acid can be transported in the blood without any carriers. In healthy people, free fatty acids are burned in the mitochondria soon after release from storage forms of fat, which is triglyceride and phospholipids. The most prominent role of mitochondria is to produce energy in each cell in our body through respiration and to regulate cellular metabolism. Now, the number of these little factories, mitochondria, in a cell can vary widely by organism, by the type of tissue and cell types. For instance, red blood cells have no mitochondria, whereas liver cells can have more than 2,000. In the diabetes, inflammation, leptin resistance, and oxidative damage impair the mitochondria's ability to burn fats. What happens then is that the excess free fatty acids spill over into non-fat tissues like the liver, pancreas, and skeletal muscles. Free fatty acids damage these metabolically active tissues because they don't belong there. We call this process lipotoxicity. The lipotoxicity has been shown in several studies to cause insulin resistance and increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. Now, both inflammation and obesity cause leptin resistance. Leptin is a hormone produced by body fat. It tells the brain to decrease appetite, increase metabolic rate, and increase physical activity. As you accumulate more fat, you secrete more leptin. This causes more fat to be burned. But if you become leptin resistant, your brain doesn't hear your fat telling it that it is already full. Leptin resistance is almost always present in obesity because it is a precondition of significant fat gain. It is impossible to gain more than a few pounds without being leptin resistant. So leptin resistance and inflammation set the stage for impaired fat and glucose metabolism, which in turn cause insulin resistance, the defining characteristics of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. In a study published in Inflammation Research in January 2014, the researchers investigated the anti-inflammatory effect of chlorogenic acid, which is in lean, and the results that they published stated that chlorogenic acid significantly inhibited the expression of COX-2 without any cytotoxicity. COX-2 is an enzyme that is responsible for formation of certain compounds responsible for inflammation. Chlorogenic acid not only inhibited COX-2 enzyme, but it also lessened pro-inflammatory molecules which are involved in regulating the immune system's response to inflammation and infection and other inflammation-related markers. The conclusion was that chlorogenic acid may be beneficial for the prevention and treatment of inflammatory diseases. Tonight, I have a special news for you. For the first time, I am going to reveal a study with Boracial lean coffee that was published in Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism in June of this year, 2015. In this study, the scientists investigated whether a chlorogenic acid and chromium supplement formulated with coffee could come in rescue of obesity and insulin resistance caused by high-fat feeding. This was an in vivo study conducted in the College of Medicine and Life Sciences at the Center of Diabetes and Endocrine Research in a very reputable university in the United States. This laboratory is at the cutting edge of research in obesity, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and related diseases. I will discuss more about this study in our upcoming convention, but for now, I will tell you that the objective of this study was to investigate whether lean coffee reverses the metabolic abnormalities included by high-fat diet in BL6 mice, an animal model that responds metabolically to dietary fat like humans. No mice were sacrificed during this study. Mice were fed either high-fat or regular diet for 7 weeks. In the last 3 weeks of feeding, some of high-fat fed mice were fasted daily for 1 hour before they were subjected to a once daily oral gavage of lean coffee using a feeding tube. That means, they fed the mice the coffee using this feeding tube directly into their stomach. This is similar to the protocol we have for the lean coffee, that you would drink it half an hour before you have food. Now, feeding mice a fat-rich diet for 4 weeks caused an increase in their body weight relative to mice fed a regular diet. After this 4 weeks period, they were fed lean coffee supplementation, which prevented further gain in body weight and reduced it significantly within 2 weeks until it reached a level comparable to that fed a regular normal diet for 7 weeks. In addition to obesity, 4 weeks of high-fat diet caused insulin resistance in mice. To investigate whether lean coffee reverses diet-induced insulin resistance, the researchers administered a daily oral dose of lean to some of these high-fat-fed mice for 3 weeks, as they continue to have free access to high-fat diet, while control mice were supplemented with water alone. What they found was that lean coffee supplementation reduced diet-induced insulin intolerance. Furthermore, chlorogenic acid and chromium restored insulin tolerance in these high-fat fed mice to a level comparable to that in mice fed a regular diet. As you can see, these findings underscore the important role that chlorogenic acid and chromium play in maintaining glucose metabolism and insulin response, in addition to reverse obesity in mice fed a high-fat diet. As of this moment, Boracia Lean is the only coffee supplement that has been subjected to a scientific research study, proving its efficacy in reversing obesity and maintaining glucose metabolism and insulin response, with results published in a prestigious peer-reviewed scientific journal. Now, let's talk about another aspects of lean coffee, antioxidant beneficial as a nutrients for your health. Let me talk a little bit about antioxidants. Dietary polyphenols are thought to be beneficial for human health as antioxidants. Polyphenols are molecules present in fruits, vegetables, nuts, and other types of foods. It has been reported that coffee had the highest concentration of polyphenols among other beverages analyzed. The major polyphenols in coffee is, of course, chlorogenic acid. However, during the roasting process, this compound is destroyed due to the heating process. We are adding chlorogenic acid to lean at a clinically response dose. In previous talks, I discussed chlorogenic acid mechanism as far as retarding glucose absorption from the small intestine, as well as glucose release from the liver into the bloodstream. This makes lean a diabetic-friendly coffee, especially in combination with our patent-pending chromium compounds, which we also incorporated at the clinical dose when you take 3 servings of any Boracia products. However, beyond glucose management properties, the chlorogenic acid exhibits many other biological properties, including antioxidant, antibacterial, and particularly hypoglycemic and lipidemic effects. Intracellular glucose and lipid metabolic homeostasis is very vital for maintaining the basic life activities of a cell or an organism. Homeostasis is the tendency of an organism or a cell to regulate its internal conditions, usually by a system of feedback controls and mechanisms, so as to stabilize health and functioning regardless of the outside changing conditions. Intracellular glucose and lipid metabolic disorders are the basis of a variety of metabolic diseases. In fact, glucose and lipid metabolic disorders are closely related to the occurrence and progression of diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and even cancer. Chlorogenic acid have been recently claimed to modulate lipid metabolism in vivo in both healthy and genetically metabolic disorder conditions. It causes lipolysis, which is the breakdown of lipids in our body and hence losing fat. As far as antioxidant properties of chlorogenic acid, in a report recently published in the International Journal of Pharmacology, researchers studied the beneficial effects of chlorogenic acid and caffeic acid, which is a major metabolite of chlorogenic acid. To evaluate the antioxidant activity of chlorogenic acid in vivo, they used an intestinal ischemia reperfusion model. Now let me explain what that is. Ischemic injury occurs when the blood supply to an area of the tissue is cut off. Reperfusion injury is the tissue damage caused when blood supply returns to the tissue after a period of ischemia or lack of oxygen. The absence of oxygen and nutrients from blood during the ischemic period creates a condition in which the restoration of circulation results in inflammation and oxidative damage through the induction of oxidative stress rather than restoration of normal function. The incidence of ischemic injury is vast. Myocardial infarction, stroke, and other thrombotic events affect more than 1.3 million each year in the United States alone. Just to give you an idea about ischemia and reperfusion, let me explain what happens during a heart attack, which is the likely sequence of events of a ischemia reperfusion injury. What happens during a heart attack is that aerobic metabolism interrupted. The blood doesn't get to the heart. At this stage, the metabolites start accumulating in the cells because the cells are still active. Now, if you revive the patient, now oxygen will get back to the heart, and with reperfusion, which is now when the oxygen gets back, aerobic metabolism again started, and at this stage, free radicals and hydrogen peroxide start accumulating in the cells. Well, the antioxidant system of a cell now at this stage overwhelmed. Oxidative cell damage starts occurring, and lipid peroxidation starts occurring as well. And the cell damage stimulates synthesis of inflammatory compounds, and that triggers neutrophils and macrophages to attack the reperfused tissues. And that happens, when those muscles basically die, and at this stage, they are not active anymore. So just an example, but going back to antioxidant properties of chlorogenic acid, what these researchers found was that both chlorogenic acid and caffeic acid had protective effects on intestinal ischemia reperfusion injury. Upon ingestion, chlorogenic acid is hydrolyzed into caffeic acid in the small intestine. Therefore, it is possible that caffeic acid plays a major role in the protective effect of chlorogenic acid against ischemia reperfusion injury. So that's very important, and I just want to say, in wrapping up our discussion tonight, I would like to emphasize that this recent research study is of epic importance for the lean product. So tonight we discussed the efficacy of lean in possible reversing of obesity and insulin resistance. We talked about chlorogenic acid biological properties such as antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and insulin sensitizing activities. For the first time ever, lean coffee proved to reverse obesity and insulin resistance in an in vivo study, which results published in a prestigious peer-reviewed journal. We learned that lean coffee causes lipolysis and ruptures fatty cells and use the free fatty acid, which is released as a source of substrates to make energy for the body. Clinical studies on our patent-pending chromium complex showed that it improves glucose metabolism, reduces inflammation, enhancing antioxidant status of the body. You need to take some food after 30 minutes of drinking the coffee. The clinical studies on the ingredients, as well as the in vivo study which I just talked about, conducted under such conditions. The active ingredients in lean immediately go to work within those 30 minutes after drinking lean. Once you take the food, then it is going to be metabolized efficiently and provide your body with the energy and the vitality that you would expect to get from the nutrients, and not being those ingredients deposited as fat. Now, if you like to add cream, such as half and half to your coffee, feel free to add 1 to 1.5 tablespoons to your coffee. I wish you a restful evening, and looking forward to seeing you all at our convention soon. Good night.